Awesome. Hey everyone, my name is Sam. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the member experience manager here at Advent Co-working. We are a creative co-working space, event space, wellness center, podcast studio, art gallery. But most importantly, we're a community, and we're so excited for this event, our Advent member talks. It's a weekly event we put on with each week featuring a different member on the topic of their choosing. And it's actually, we're celebrating our 1 year anniversary today. So we did our first, yes, we did our first Advent member talk a year ago, the first Tuesday of January 2020. So things have changed a lot since then, but we're so thankful to still have this amazing Advent community and to be able to promote our members and learn from them. So we're going to be hearing from Mike today, who's going to be talking to us about how you can nail down your, content publishing process. So if you have any questions for Mike throughout the talk, please just, drop it in the comments, and we'll do a short Q&A at the end. So Mike, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. It's crazy to think that it's been a year already of Advent member talks. I remember when they were just getting started. So 2020 both was excruciatingly slow, but also apparently very fast at the same time. And I appreciate being able to do another one. I think this is my third talk. So thank you for having me.
We love having you.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk today about nailing down your content publishing process. So really quick for context, who I am, in case anyone watching doesn't know me. My name is Mike Barugel. I've been an Advent member now for 3.5 years, I think is the right number, maybe just over 3 years. Could not agree more with the concept Sam mentioned of community is the reason I joined and the reason I continue. So very thankful for Advent continuing to help cultivate that as we are in really uncharted territory. And there's been enough said about that. So I have sort of two roles that I want to mention really quickly. I work for the Small Business and Technology Development Center, very long name. The acronym is SBTDC for short. And we're an organization that exists throughout the state of North Carolina. And in fact, there's an SBDC in every state and US territory. And we provide free and confidential business counseling to businesses in our state. So if you need any assistance with anything regarding your business, working through challenges, trying to figure out how to grow and scale, any and all questions, or even access to resources, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or go directly to our website, sbtdc.org. I also run a business I've been running for almost 4 years now called FYT Virtual Assistants. That stands for Free Your Time. And essentially, we provide operations strategy and implementation support to help you, the business owner, focus more on your passion and what you love doing in your business as you grow and scale. So happy to chat about that if anyone has any questions at any point. I want to talk today, and I'm going to bring up an outline I've put together, and you'll have to excuse the process brain, but there's not going to be any graphics to this. I know this is a shorter style talk, so only about 20-25 minutes. So it's going to be very much content driven, which makes sense because we're talking about putting a process together. I want to talk a little bit through content strategy, content publishing process, some best practices that I've kind of learned over the course of doing this myself in my businesses and with clients, and then I can open it up to some Q&A at the end here. I did want to ask for anyone that is watching, if you're there, what is your biggest challenge right now around publishing content? And hopefully Sam can relay if there's any responses to that. So I just wanted to pose that question and let me know if there's a particular struggle you're having, and hopefully I'll address it during my topic points here, but if not, we can talk about it during the Q&A. So big picture for content strategy. So the most important place to start typically is to figure out, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals? And aligning those goals to what you're doing with your content. So whether it's a business or some sort of hobby that you're looking to turn into a business, or maybe just a hobby and something you're doing as a side hustle, how are you using content in your business right now? Is it, for example, to establish authority in your field, be able to present yourself as knowing about your particular expertise, positioning yourself that way? Maybe it's to raise visibility. Maybe you're specifically driving traffic to a product page or some sort of site, or maybe something else. So just aligning and making sure that you always have that big picture goal in mind. Here's why I'm producing this content with the end goal of X, whatever that may be. Establishing your frequency. So how often do you intend to post? And we're going to talk about next different types of mediums, but I just want to stress the importance and the helpfulness of batching when you're thinking about posting content, whether it's through whether it's a podcast, blog, or whatever it might be. Um, Batching things into set processes can really help you stay efficient and consistent. We're going to come back to that in a second. Setting realistic goals. I think myself included. So I started a podcast last year and I was like, I'm going to post every week for the entire year. And there were some weeks where I was able to stay consistent and other times throughout the year where I just needed a break. And so it takes a little bit of understanding kind of how you work and what's realistic for you, but setting some realistic goals to start and then adjusting as you go, maybe every quarter, figuring out, okay, is this working? Do I need to do more often, less often? What's realistic? And is this aligning with my goals? Sometimes you're also maybe posting additional content if you're launching something, whether it's a product or service. And so you may have to kind of grind it out in those months leading up to that or weeks leading up to that. Just some thoughts to kind of help you decide how often you're going to be publishing that content. Then you want to decide, not necessarily in this order, but another thing to consider is what medium suits you best. So just like you've probably heard some other people talk about, like on social media, like where should you post? Well, it's kind of a combination of where does your audience live and where are you most comfortable. I would say very much the same thing with publishing content in general. It's like, where do you feel the most comfortable? Are you more comfortable writing? Are you more comfortable being on camera? Are you more comfortable talking to a microphone, or some combination of those things? That's probably the best place to start if you're just starting to publish new content. If you have been already, start to think about like which area, what are you more motivated towards? Where are you being pulled? Which ones are you resisting more? That's probably a good sign that that's going to take some extra energy. Not necessarily that you shouldn't be doing it on that medium, but it's a little bit more helpful to go where you're more naturally called. And that way you can really focus on knocking it out of the park and producing really, really good quality content. Creating content. So getting into that, where do people pull ideas from? And again, this is kind of just big picture stuff that's going to lead us into our process that we're going to try to build. But creating content, there's lots of places you can get some inspiration from, whether it's your own life or pulling ideas. If you already have some existing audience, whether you've got an email list that you can ask questions to or poll or put a survey out there to. Maybe you've got customers in your business that you're already working with. And so as you're speaking with those customers, you can start to get ideas for what types of things that they're struggling with. A great place to start is pain points and common questions, right? Like, what are the things that the people in your audience are struggling with or are asking about? And those are really good places to start when you're thinking about what type of content and what topics for content that you want to put out there, because you're going to address things that your audiences are almost automatically going to be connected to and want to listen to or read about. This is not my area of expertise because I'm coming more from an operations standpoint as opposed to a marketing standpoint, but SEO research tools, there are many out there. You can probably talk to other Advent members who do more of this type of work to get their opinions, but you can actually do some SEO research to see what some keywords are that people are searching within your niche or within your industry and generate some ideas for topics that way. And also filling in the gaps or needs. We talked about that a bit, answering specific questions. The more you can get to know your audience specifically and what they're struggling with, I think the better and the easier it makes it to focus on. Repurposing content. So I'd heard this advice a lot, and I'm starting to really heed it, when I'm talking to clients at my job and through my business as well, is like, try to repurpose and be as efficient as you can with the content that you have. So for example, if you are doing any sort of long form or video content, like, go ahead and record the whole thing, wherever that may be, or maybe that's not even posted publicly, but record like everything and then figure out how do you want to chunk this out. So maybe you use a 1-minute clip to throw on Instagram or somewhere else like that. Or maybe you put like the whole thing on YouTube or parts of it on YouTube and then link, to get the full thing, you can sign up for my email list. And that's a nice way to kind of grow your audience as well. So focus on recording as much or capturing as much. This doesn't have to be just video. This could also be audio for podcasting. This could also just be, an exercise for journaling your thoughts, right? And then kind of taking the best parts of that and then focusing that into a very specific focused blog post. So take the long form and figure out how to chop it up in a way that's going to make sense for you, your audience. Emails that lead to a website or a blog. I think that something to think about too is like, what sort of thing that you want to like, let's say you have a newsletter that you're putting out and you might put a snippet in there that you can then, say, here's the full article on the blog or on the website, that sort of thing. And then to wrap up this section on creating content, having a content calendar can be a very, very useful exercise and a useful tool. It's like anything else, you've got 12 months in a year, but if you can start to break that down and say, all right, I'm just going to focus on this next quarter. What type of content do I want to push out? Think about your goals. Who are you trying to reach? What types of things are you really trying to put out there? And then you can say, all right, if I know I've got 3 months and I want to post one article a week, that's 12 weeks. What can I do in those 12 weeks? Go ahead and brainstorm your topics, pick the best 12. And if that's something you can stay consistent to, there you go. You've got your 12 topics that you can do. You can break that down even further and just say, all right, I just want to get 3 posts this month and I'll call that a win, right? So just doing planning and chunking that down into manageable chunks as much as you can. And I mentioned earlier, trying to set that content up around any of your business offerings, obviously, if you can, and if it makes sense. So let's talk a little bit more about kind of our bread and butter in my business and what I like to help people with, which is developing a process for publishing that content. So the most important first step that you can take is once you've done this a few times, right? So there may be some people out there who are new to publishing content. Other people have been doing this a little while and are trying to get a little bit more consistent or do it a little bit better, more efficiently out there, is to map out your process for each type of content from start to finish. So I'll use podcasting as an example because that's kind of the world I'm in right now. There are many, 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 many steps and many, many sub-steps that can be involved in publishing a podcast. And so I found it very useful after I had done the first couple to be like, okay, I put like a little bit of a shell of a process together, but I was like, what do I actually need to do to, from start to finish, from the idea, the concept of an episode, all the way to getting it published and promoting it on my site, right? Or on social media, every single step that you can think of on the way from start to finish. And then start to think with that end date in mind, right? So if you're thinking, all right, I want this piece of content to go out, let's say by the end of the month, start to think about how much time each of those steps are going to take you and be realistic as much as you can. That's sometimes a very hard thing to do. But the more that you can set that end date and then work backwards and say, all right, well, I want to have at least a week to think through the blurb that I'm going to share around publishing this podcast and the social post, right? So that means at least a week before that episode needs to be finished. It needs to be fully edited and ready to publish so that I know how I'm going to promote it. Okay, so if that's the case, how long is it going to take me to edit the episode? Well, realistically, it takes me like several hours. So I want to give myself like at least another week to edit. So you're looking already at 2 weeks in advance that you need to properly get that podcast episode out. And that's just an example, but you can kind of get the gist here of how I'm walking through is like, get that end goal, very firm and understand when you're getting something out, and then work backwards to figure out how you're going to meet that publishing deadline. Build in a buffer. This probably can go in the best practices section too, but like I said, it's kind of planning out like you need a week to do this, a week to do that. That's probably being a little conservative too. Give yourself a little extra room. Lots of other things come up. I'm sure you're, sort of juggling lots of other things that you're doing in your business or your job or your life or whatever it is. So budget yourself a little extra time if you can to get things done, even if you think something might only take you a day or two. Maybe start off by budgeting 3 or 4 days just to be sure that you'll get everything in order, especially as you're starting out. So I mentioned this before, as you're creating content, try to batch as much as you can. So when I say that, again, I'll use podcasting as an example first, and then we can maybe explore another one. So for podcasting, if you're putting out podcast episodes pretty regularly, let's say you're publishing weekly or even every other week, it's really helpful if you have, for example, a day of the week or even a day of the month where you batch record. And a lot of podcast experts agree with this because it's like you're already in the mindset, you're in the zone, there's less resistance to like starting and kind of like saying, all right, well, I gotta switch gears from whatever I'm doing and then like get myself in this mode where I have to, be on in front of the microphone. If you're doing that several times throughout the week, it's probably a lot of switching back and forth between types of activities and brain power and what you're used to doing. If you can batch this and say, this is it, Tuesdays are my day to record. I know that I'm going to have my prep done by Monday or even Sunday, knowing what I'm going to talk to my guest about or what I'm going to talk about on my podcast. I'm going to be ready to go. Tuesday is my recording day. Maybe Thursday is your editing day, right? So you're kind of breaking these up into, I'm going to batch record maybe 2 or 3 episodes on a Tuesday. And then the previous ones I did last week, all right, Thursday's my day to edit, and I'm going to really focus on just doing that. So your brain is staying in one mode for that day or that chunk. You can do something really similar with blog posts and writing. So if you're doing a newsletter or if you're just writing blog posts, there's often steps involved with that too, right? So you may be doing some research, you may be gathering data, you may be trying to gather inspiration, right? So sometimes it's helpful to dedicate some time to just doing that piece before you start writing. I've also heard, I'm not a huge writer, but I've heard from other people who do write more consistently that it's really, really helpful to have a day where you're just writing and not focusing on editing, right? So same thing with the podcast. You're just focusing on getting this stuff on paper. Then you're going to come back to it, whether it's the next day or another day that week, and you're going to refine. And that's a different part of the brain that's working. So again, separating out into chunks where you say, this is the day I'm going to do the actual brain dumping, the getting the ideas out on paper. Here's the day where I'm going to collect and edit that a bit more, refine it a bit more. Maybe there's another day where you're publishing it, right? So you're really figuring out how to be as optimized and efficient with this whole thing as you can. Cool. I talked about time blocking, creating a repository system where you can deposit ideas and organize later. So I am the king of finding the best next tool, for everything that I like to do in my business, probably to a fault. I would say wherever you're most comfortable and wherever you're already organizing your thoughts is probably the place that you want to organize your ideas for whatever content that you're posting. So whether it's blog posts, podcasts, videos, live streams, whatever you're doing, find one place where you can keep that sort of repository of ideas and that you can easily pull from and say, all right, I don't really know where my next, month's worth of content's coming from. Let me go visit this thing, see what sparks an idea in me. I'm going to take that and run with it. Then on to publishing. So again, this probably goes back to the beginning of thinking like, how often do you want to do this? But decide on a frequency and try to stay as consistent as you can. So again, if you can commit to weekly or every other week, right? It's the more that you are in that mode, the probably the greater chance that it's actually going to get done because there's some structure to it. And then also your audience can kind of start to look for it in that type of frequency. If, for example, if you're doing videos, I'll switch up the examples here. A lot of people will post, let's say 2 videos a week. So they'll do one on Tuesdays and one on Thursdays, or just as an example. And so their audience comes to know, to expect that. And they may even get excited about it. And it also probably gives them a better chance of being ready to share that too when it comes out. And so when they watch it, hopefully they'll share it with other people that they might find it interesting with as well, or that might find it interesting as well. Another thing with publishing is delegating as much as you can. And this is something I've learned a lot. And it is something that I help clients with in our business, in my business. But there are lots of pieces, like we've been talking about, lots of moving pieces with publishing content. Most people probably feel like they want to be the one to generate the content, although not always, but that's usually the important part. Some people want to hold on to the editing part of it. Again, whether it's a podcast, a video, or writing. Lots of people feel like they can start to delegate once they get to this publishing piece. And that's where an operations person, such as someone from my company or a virtual assistant, there are many out there these days, can really help take over these pieces of the process so that you can focus a little bit more on actually doing the important part for you, which is generating that original content that's really high quality. And then promoting, deciding how you will promote, whether it's through social, an email list, leveraging partnerships, going out to other similar websites or people that are partners, and asking them to share it, or having a guest post on someone else's blog or podcast or channel or something like that. So you can start by figuring out who are your in real life connections, and start to talk with them and see if there's some natural partnerships that can form to help you spread the word. And then hopefully in return, you can help them with whatever makes sense for you to help them with in their business as well. There are several scheduling tools out there for sort of scheduling posts ahead of time. I know, again, I'm not a marketing expert and not a social media expert, but I know Instagram kind of came out with some new tool recently where you can schedule in advance, and links with Facebook and stuff like that, which I haven't looked into yet, but we use Later for my podcast, and that's seemed to work well for us. So there's some options out there for you. Okay, I feel like I'm going on hyperspeed. So the last piece before any questions is just some best practices. So there are several, for any type of content that's written that you're going to put out there, or even comments or anything that's going to go along with videos or even podcasts too. There's proofreading tools out there like Grammarly. There are a number of really, really helpful, effective transcript tools, like where it'll automatically generate a transcript if you're doing any sort of voice over. I use Descript to edit my podcast, and it automatically transcribes the audio, which is really, really nice. And it's a pretty affordable tool. I know that there are tons out there, but that can be really helpful to save you some time. I mentioned hiring a VA, whether it's us or someone else, to help delegate some of the publishing process. So the pieces where you don't need to touch, where your time is better spent on other things, it can be really helpful just to nail down your process, or have someone help you nail down the process and then delegate that out. Build in breaks. There's probably like 0.1% of people in the world can be like a machine and just like grind it out every single day, every single week, however often they say they're going to do it. Most people are going to hit a wall at some point, whether it's the holidays, you got something going on, or there's whatever. So what I've learned is it's helpful to build in those breaks. So you might have some expectations to post consistently, but be realistic too about, seasons throughout the year and when you're going to give yourself some time off, which may really be helpful to sort of recharge a bit, and then figure out how to continue to put out really good content. Batch up front, give yourself breathing room later. So I know that there are people out there who, they plan their 3-month content calendar. They've got some blog posts, they've got some videos, whatever they're doing, and they pretty much do most of the actual recording or capturing of the content like in the first couple of weeks. And then they kind of just like, they'll do all their videos, they'll do all their blog posts in those first couple of weeks, and then maybe set aside a little time to do some editing. And then those next 2 months, they've just got content kind of coming out consistently that they can schedule, right? So just depending on how you work, you might want to batch things, or maybe you like to just have a little bit more consistency and do a little bit each week, just thinking about what works best for you and your style. Matching content to your business mission and vision obviously is really an important step. Probably should come at the beginning as well, along with your goals. And then most important, have fun with it. There's so much you can do, and there's so much perspective that you have and that you can offer. And the more you can kind of figure out what your audience is looking for and how you can help meet their needs with your collection of experience and wisdom and fun ways to entertain and inspire, I think that's what makes all of this fun. So enjoy the process. That's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. Content is such a huge category, and a very challenging process, I know, for many, and can be very overwhelming. how do you know, how much content, what kind of content, what kind of platform, you want to promote on, and just try to figure out like who is your audience and where are they. So I'm interested to know like when did you first like get into content creation and kind of, yeah, how did you first get started in that process?
Yeah, I feel like there's more than one answer to that question. So I'll try to answer succinctly. When I first started really looking into running my own virtual assistant business like 4 years ago, I stumbled upon a couple podcasts that were about entrepreneurship, specifically like more for like startups and independent, startups and people who just really wanted to take something they were passionate about and make a business out of it. And so that sparked my interest in listening to people talk about their experience and give, share best practices and honestly just be human about it and share stories. The Fizzle podcast is specifically one that really got me interested in entrepreneurship. Um, and then, like I mentioned last year, I started my own podcast, the Live Your Values podcast. And so that kind of took my interest, and actually, I decided I wanted to do something with it. And I've really enjoyed, running a podcast, and it's been a lot of fun. But I also enjoy helping other people kind of figure out what their sort of area of expertise is and how to help them figure out how to share their message as well, whether that's through podcast or some other medium.
Awesome. So a few questions. We have a few minutes left.
Sure.
When you're looking at delegating tasks, I know, like you said, make sure that your content is, within your mission, within your values, but also I think it's important that it's using your voice as well, and that there should be consistent language. So when you're delegating tasks, how do you decide which tasks are appropriate to delegate, and which you should, really hold on to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the exercises that I like to go through when I'm working with a new client, for example, is, you know, we'll go through, I'll ask them like, let's go ahead and list out all of the tasks that are involved. Let's just say with this particular thing. So let's say, list out all the tasks that you do with publishing your content. And we'll go through them together, and I'll say, which of these things do you need to do? And I'll ask them that. And then which of these things do you think could get done without you? And so that's typically a good place to start. I think some people will have a little bit more resistance to letting go of certain things for whatever reason. I find that most people tend to want to hold on to the creative control piece, which is like generating the content, coming up with the content themselves. And then they start to realize like, okay, like I probably don't need to be involved in posting it, right? That's something that could be delegated because it quite frankly doesn't need my voice on that, the publishing piece itself. Now, coming up with the social post or the way that you're promoting it certainly might, and we can come up with that, language, or we can kind of help you figure that out. But the actual posting of it can be something that can be easily delegated. And then other things like editing, sometimes people start to realize like they don't want to be as involved in that too. So it starts with a conversation.
Got it. And, as a VA and even here at Advent, we work with Social Grid, we have assistance with our social media and with our content. So as a VA or as someone who's working for someone else to create that content, if there are like items or content or information that you have to receive from that other person, how can you streamline your process, when perhaps your time blocking just doesn't line up with the folks who you're waiting to receive that info from?
Yeah. Well, I think when I submitted the description for this talk, I said something about, replicating this in your task management tool of choice. And I am an Asana geek. And so whatever you're using, whether it's Trello, Asana, or anything else out there, I know there are tons and tons of tools. Um, the short of it is get your complete process absolutely outlined, like from start to finish, every single step that's involved, and then use a task manager to start to create a template, put all of those in there, assign them, and then put like expected dates or deadlines with it. And so, like I said before, if you know you need 3 weeks to do X task or 2 weeks to do X task, then just put in a note for that task like -2 weeks. So you know that that needs to happen 2 weeks before the completion of that task. So that's something that we love to do, is to help businesses and clients create those processes so that they stay accountable and they know who's getting things done, because it's very clearly assigned to whoever's doing that task.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mike. I love that you keep doing member talks. You have so much to share, and I think each one has been about a completely different topic, which is just really cool. So if you haven't seen Mike's other member talks, go to our YouTube channel, Advent Co-working Videos. You can view all of our 30 plus member talks that we've had in this past year. So Mike, if folks want to get a hold of you, ask you more questions, hire you, learn about your work, how can they do that?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much. It's been an honor. I really appreciate it. So easiest way to get in touch with me is either if you're an Advent member through the board there is fine, or just email me at mikeb@fytva.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And thank you so much, everyone who's joined us today. We will be back next Tuesday at 4:30. We're going to have our member Asia on, and she's actually going to be talking about recording her very first audiobook. So thank you again, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.